All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today is Wheel of Time Reread Day. We are getting close to the end of Lord of Chaos, but there, as is his style, there's a lot that happens
Yeah, this
as
one
you
this
get
one's
close to
kind of
the
a
end here.
tweener too. It's like we could probably finish in one long episode or two shorter ones.
Hmm.
It's we'll kind of take a look at time when we get to the end of the Perrin stuff probably and see if we want to close it out.
Yeah, but first we get Matt being Matt, which is always fun. As he throws out his banner, the banner of the hand, for all of Salidar to see, just because he's being cheeky. Um, and right off the bat, he hands out all the coin he has on him and tells them pay for everything and accept no gifts. The band isn't going to be beholden to anybody here. So, I mean, he knows what's going on and he knows the pitfalls and dangers here.
Yeah, well, even in the first couple of paragraphs there, we get some of inside Matt's head, which is kind of one of the things that makes him so attachable to everybody. Everybody likes him is because he's admitting to the page that he's got serious imposter syndrome.
Mm,
He despite being the hero of Karheim, as we were talking about before we came on air, and despite all these generals starting to look up to him, he's still like, I don't belong here.
mhm.
But they depend on me, so I'm going to pretend like I do and to fake it till I make it.
Yeah. Well, and part of it, I think, is what we see right here at the beginning of the chapter on page 777, when he's talking about the memories. So I that he's been talking for a little bit in his head about how it's getting harder and harder to distinguish those memories as separate, as not his own life. But it's not there yet. So he's not going to feel like he has the experience to stand up to these people. Um, you know, he could almost certainly go toe to toe with Brine and beat him, even though
Mm-hmm.
Brine has decades of experience as a general and is considered all across the continent as one of the top five great generals alive right now. Um, but he's not going to feel like that outside of the moment. In the moment, when the kind of the uh, natural flow of things gets going, and when that fight or flight kind of kicks in, he's not going to think. And we've seen that when he first took charge of what became the band. It just flew naturally because it had to.
Yeah, well, and this is actually a good quality because confidence is great and it can help your performance. But at the same time, because of that little bit of hesitation, he is less likely to be rash, to go off. He's not going to be the guy out picking fights,
Hmm.
but he is very competent in the fact that he can handle it when it happens.
Yeah. Um, the this is one of my favorite scenes, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence that uh um this happens right after Matt dances with Halima, and uh it should have been nothing, but before he had gone 10 paces, the fox head went icy cold on his chest. He spun around looking furiously for anything at all. What he saw was Halima staring at him in the firelight. Only for an instant before she seized a tall warder's arm and whirled back into the dance. And then he gives us a couple of verses of this song, The Color of Trust, which I love I love these instances where Jordan talks about how there's this tune, but it has different words. The song is known as different things in different places. And clearly the tune that is being played here is something, you know, upbeat. It's a dance tune, because they're having this, this week of revelry because a new Emerylin has been raised. And yet the words that pop into Matt's mind from some memory is uh is a very sardonic group of lyrics.
Oh wait, it's not a spoiler. I was writing something down for spoilers, but it's not a spoiler because we know who Halima is already. This answers the question that Matt had earlier in this book of whether it stops males channeling. He said, "I know it stops women, but I don't know if it stops men."
Yeah, of course he doesn't know that yet.
Yeah, he doesn't know that, but I was just making sure it wasn't a spoiler for the audience.
Mhm.
But no, we already know who she is and that she channels Satan instead of Sadar.
Yep.
So the question is answered.
um I like the interaction he has with I believe this is Myril. Yeah, of Myril and her not so veiled innuendo, uh trying to get him in bed so that she can bond him as a warder.
I mean, with the description of Myril, even if she's an Aes Sedai, I'm weaker than Matt, I
Ooh,
guess.
yeah.
Oof.
Um and then he goes up and tries to get all flirty accidentally with Swan. And I love the reply. I asked you once whether you'd be there when the house was burning down, boy, but it seems you make a habit of jumping into fires. Now go away and find somebody who wants to dance with you. Uh, I don't know. I'm trying to think how much I want to talk about before just kind of jumping to the end.
Well, what I like about this chapter is because of what's coming up, it's almost like, yeah, you get some character development, but it's almost like Jordan wanted you to have this little happy moment, this little fun moment before the end
Mhm.
of the book, which is I had to wear a happy shirt today just because we're getting there. So
Yeah. Um, all right. So it's 784, 785 is when we get to Matt setting off, joining with Elaine and Nynaeve to set off for Ibudar. Um, and one of the things I like about the scene is because of what Matt does here, even after he has just learned that uh the girls were purposely boxing him in, trying to force him to make sure he goes to Ibudar with the girls. And part of that was keeping Tom and Julian away from him so that they wouldn't let slip what the plans were until the last moment, so Matt couldn't get out of it. So they could make sure Matt goes along um, with them. But then even after that, uh, when Egwene comes up and uh, he hops down and performs this elaborate bow and addresses her by her title because he's savvy enough. Even if Tom hadn't told him, Tom knows the particulars and he can fill in some details, but he can see the way Egwene is being treated by the others. And by golly, you know, despite everything else, she's my friend. She's from the same village as me, and I'm not going to stand around and let them treat her like this. So I'm going to hop down and I'm going to glare at my men so they do the same thing, and I'll bow to the Amarillan as her title deserves. Okay. When do we get to?
Well, it's kind of like my older brother. Used to beat the crap out of me every day, but if someone else tried to beat me up, it was
Mhm.
no, I can do that. You can't. And he would jump in.
Okay. And then it we get that chapter to set things up, but then we jump to Perrin to completely change directions. Um, at least for a bit. Uh, I always like Perrin scenes. Um, and I like the way uh that Jordan starts this chapter. So we get a couple of pages. The introduction is not from Perrin's point of view, even though, we have the wolf icon here to let us know this is a Perrin chapter.
Mhm.
We start with this random Saldean's point of view. Uh, to because Perrin, he kind of needs to, as well as being, a good introduction, he kind of needs to set the scene because Perrin's not going to think about his procession in the same way that an outsider who has no idea what's going on here is going to think about it.
Mhm.
So we see he has all these Two Rivers peoples with him. He is, you know, as what was this kid's name? Vilnar is thinking this is clearly a lord of some sort, although it is the strangest procession that he's ever seen because it's mounted people. Um, they have banners, but all the bowmen are carrying the biggest bows this guy has ever seen, and they're all dressed like farmers. But of course, Perrin doesn't think of it, despises the idea that he's a lord, and doesn't like to think himself as nobility, but he is now. And so he carries this air of authority, even though um even though he still acts like the blacksmith that he is deep down.
Well, and we have a little bit, we see it in the earlier books, but now do the 3 weeks later on the bottom of the screen,
Mm-hmm.
and because we've seen it before we have the time lapse, we know Faile has been really grooming him
Mm-hmm.
over that time because she subtly nudges him towards being that leader that he should be. And now we've got a time lapse where because we know it's happening, we can imagine that he would already be nudged that way and probably have a much more commanding presence on his horse. He's already a formidable looking person.
Mm-hmm.
His beard is coming in. Uh, and now you've got an army behind them, even though they look like farmers. They're definitely it's a substantial number.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that leads to impression.
Well, and he even thinks that. So down at the bottom of 793, he expected Fail to say a good deal about sending everyone back. He expected her to bring up what was due his so-called position and insist on the 20 Barada had mentioned, and as close to the 50 as they could manage as well. But she was leaning out of her saddle to speak in whispers with Bane and Chiad. He made a point of not listening, though he could still make out parts of her words. Um, so Perrin is expecting it that, no, you're a noble. You need your due. You need your, the numbers, the procession that any other noble would have. Uh,
And I think that's where it kind of goes wrong a little bit, and where Fael oversteps. He needs to take on the persona of a leader,
mhm,
but there's a difference between a leader and a noble, and he still needs to be ordained with a title to be a noble because they are, even though they don't think of themselves that way. Elaine and Morgase and all of those do have a point that it is part of that realm. At the same time, there's concessions on both sides. They should say, well, we did need a leader and now you're the best for the job, instead of getting all butthurt about it.
yeah.
Um, But on his side, he still never got that. So there is a sense of overstepping on Fale's part that
Mhm.
that kind of adds fuel to the fire of the nobles calling it kind of a rebellion.
Yep, yep, yep. Um, all right. And as I've kind of been griping about for a while, one of my uh beefs with this kind of middle part of the series, even though I think, I really like the plot threads that are going on, and there are a lot of great scenes here that I really like. The one of the frustrating things to me about these middle books is how he splits up um the triad, and they don't really come back together. Um, Although you do have it, he doesn't split it off completely, at least yet, because through Shadow Rising and Fires of Heaven, you still had Matt with Rand. And now Matt's been sent off, but Perrin comes back in. And I like the contrast with how uh, Perrin and Rand interact. Um, Especially given, and you've talked quite a bit about the personality types, the archetypes that they are. And we saw earlier when Rand sent Matt off on this errand to get Elaine, the the interaction there, from Matt's point of view. And now we have Perrin's point of view as he comes in, and Matt from the beginning fit more seamlessly into that world, in large part because he likes the finery.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so he was able to, even though in mentality and outlook and principles, he didn't really fit in with those nobles in tier. He very seamlessly fit into their world.
Well, and Matt also, because of his open personality, he, yeah, he sees the danger in everything, but he also sees the good parts of everything. So yeah, I hate the way these nobles are and how snooty they are, but man, this is comfortable. This wine is good. These card games are fun. Getting used to the company. Having a maid's not so bad. He starts to see all the good things too, and is like, well, do I really want to give that up? Not
Mhm.
really. Where Perrin, he could care less.
Exactly. And this is
Yeah.
so 796, kind of in the middle there. It's just a short paragraph. It's just a one long sentence, but uh, it's one of those things that Jordan sometimes gets criticisms for being overly verbose. I mean, if you look at word count, the books are ridiculously long. And so one of the criticisms has been that he retreads the same ground or other things, but it his words are always purposeful. And so here you have one long sentence that says a lot, I think, of, and that's why I brought up the contrast between with how, remember how Matt was acting previously. And here you have Perrin as they're walking up. Perrin was wondering whether it was always like this around Rand now. Aiel guards and nobody speaking. And so this is Perrin's perception of what's going on. I don't know that Matt's going to notice that because he has kind of fit seamlessly into that world, as I said. So he's used to this. He's used to the guards and the servants and the decorum and the hierarchy. Perrin isn't. He doesn't like it. He's still the small town blacksmith deep inside. And so he's noticing this, and I think the kind of the clear implication there is worry for Rand, not just his personal dislike for this kind of a world, but is Rand still Rand? I think is the
Mm-hmm.
unspoken question there in Perrin's mind. And then the second half of the sentence, when suddenly the doors were flung open and there was Rand in his shirt sleeves. I almost feel like there's an implied sigh there, like there's an implied sense of relief to Perrin that, you know, I don't like this, the way Rand, my friend, the shepherd, is now an emperor, and he's got all of these imperial regalia around him that's reinforcing that. But here he is in his shirt sleeves, a natural and authentic smile on his face as he welcomes them and, excitedly congratulates them on their wedding.
Well, and he's got a smaller scale version of it based on what happened to him in the Two Rivers, which you get in the next couple
Mm-hmm.
sentences. Lord Perrin, how did you know? He sees how it can change you, and he's been resisting it the whole time. And he's wondering if, to the scale that Rand's been getting, has Rand been able to resist that? Where Matt just goes with the flow. He grumbles and gripes and complains, but everybody knows Matt's gonna Matt. Whereas Perrin is genuinely worried about it because he kind of sees a similar stubborn mindset where if the things that are in place that could have corrupted me, did they corrupt Rand? Especially since I probably couldn't have handled it at that scale as well.
Mm-hmm. And he is the thinker,
Mm-hmm.
so he has to know, he has to know, even if he doesn't, know the technical psychological blah blah blah, he knows the difference in his friends' personalities, and so he has to know that this is Matt. This is what he does. He's gonna, he wants finery. He wants a card game with high stakes, and he wants a pretty serving girl bouncing on his knee. That's him. That's just who he is. And even if Perrin doesn't like it and that's not what he's gonna do, I don't think he's going to necessarily worry about it, except for just the general worry of, I hope he's okay there. But
Yeah,
it's
he's
still
not
him
worried
being
about.
him.
Yeah, he's not worried about the status changing Matt.
He's not worried about Matt no longer being Matt.
Yeah.
Um, where is it? All right, and then blah blah blah, it's a little, catching up, and then noticing, he notices things, and he's the thinker. So he looked tired, his eyes drawn, though his laughter did not sound it. Um, Light Perrin, blah 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 blah. What does Mistress Luhan say to that? She calls me Lord Perrin. Perrin muttered wryly. Elsbeth Luhan had smacked his bottom more often growing up than his mother had. She curtsies, Rand. She actually curtsies. Um, any more thoughts on the Rand Matt? Because then we get the Min Faile, which I love
Yeah.
too.
Oh, the
We're not
ancient
allowed.
jealousy.
Yeah, we're not allowed to talk about it. This is why Jordan is problematic and must be canceled. Yeah, let's just pretend that women aren't humans anymore. Grumble mumble, but um, there is
in modern TV, they would have just fought. We put on boxing gloves and
no,
none of this
yeah.
smile and nod with your pheromones bursting with.
No, I think they would have, in modern TV, they would have been perfect. They would have immediately bonded and been perfect together, and then immediately started telling the boys where, and how they were wrong.
Oh, okay, there's two manifestations there.
And here you have, in just a neat little half a page, this interaction gives you characterization for all of them, because Rand isn't noticing what's going on. Min clearly, and Perrin can tell, Min is clearly attached to Rand. She clearly has feelings for him because she's immediately sizing up the potential competition here. She's immediately sizing up, hey, am I still the prettiest girl in the room, or is Rand gonna stop noticing me?
Mm-hmm.
And then same thing with Faile is, there's this pretty girl that um my husband knew before me and is friends with. Do I have to
Friends
feel
enough to pick her
threatened?
up and hug her
Hmm.
off her feet. Not even just a pat on the back hug, like pick her up,
Yeah,
twirl her around kind of hug.
this is not a man hug.
Yeah.
Um, and then he's noticing it because of his senses, and immediately uncomfortable and awkward. But this is what makes Jordan good, and this is why until the woke moment of 30 seconds ago, he was widely praised for his ability to write convincing characters in general and women in particular, because he understands human nature. Women size each other up. Women compete. They do it in different ways. Guys do it, and we've talked about this both, here in the Wheel of Time context and then outside, especially when it comes to sexy time talks, that men do it consciously and subconsciously when they get together in a group. A pecking order is established, and it is almost entirely physical because that's how we're wired.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I've mentioned this before, that Peterson got in a lot of trouble for, stating the obvious fact that one of the main things that dictates interactions between males is there is always the underlying threat of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just that men are capable of that, but they are inclined to that. Well, women are still human. They are just inclined to a different way. They're not going to size each other up in physical power. They're going to size
Well,
each up in physical appearance.
and that's there's reasons why we have that nature. I mean, women need coalition, so they have to at least put on an air of cooperation to begin with, and that's why it just in general they tend towards equity as a trait of theirs. Women want fairness. But under the surface, I'm going to do these little things to make sure my side of it's a little more fair, and that's how women operate. The overall outside looking in is everybody's getting along. We're all a great community, and they need that because, well, in nature, sorry to say this, internet, but women are more vulnerable, especially when childbirth is involved, because they are vulnerable for a long period of time, and then they are vulnerable with a vulnerable person for an even longer period of time after that. So they need other women, and they need protection from the males in the group. So it's just no surprise they would adapt as schemers, where men adapt as the bigger, stronger alpha type interaction. And we do it in Western society with status too. We automatically size up people's income level. We automatically size up their intelligence. We automatically size up their size, their strength level. We go to the gym and we watch how many plates they put on, and it's an automatic process for us guys. It's the monkey dance.
It is.
That's actually the technical term for it. And there are stages to the monkey dance: the automatic sizing up, the lowering of your voice when you talk, especially if you're around attractive women, and then the puffing your chest out to make yourself look bigger. You see people that are standing off with each other. We make fun of it because it's the hands out, face forward fighting stance, but that's part of the monkey dance because you're making yourself bigger. And in that realm, there's a chance that they will back down before they fight.
Yeah. Look at hippos. When bull hippos meet,
yeah, they open their mouth.
They puff up and they open their mouth as wide as possible. Check me out. This is the size and strength of my jaws. Check out the size of my tusks. Do you really want this fight? And then if one doesn't back down, then they clash. But first, it's the peacock thing, only with more violence. And then I like the way it resolves. It resolves very naturally too. This is again, this is how it works. To your point of coalition, okay, they've sized each other up, the initial size up, and I'm immediately putting on I'm putting off a jealous scent because my first instinct is feeling threatened. Then they feel each other out. And I feel like this is another difference in the male female dynamic of when groups come together, because I feel like with men the feeling out process is part of the sizing up process. and then the hierarchy is pretty well established. Whereas women, they're going to work a little more and work a little deeper to figure out what the pecking order is and how to interact, because
Mhm.
as you say, it's a coalition thing. So there's going to be a bit of give and take, and you know, how do I get what I want in this dynamic without
Well,
just
and
because
it's
there's no puffing
specific to
of
the
your chest.
stimulus too. It's specific to the stimulus because she's still going to hold her cards tight, but she no longer feels the threat of the
Mhm.
jealous threat. The she's going to come after Perrin threat. So it flipped. It flipped to more of a mental game, not a hormonal game at that
Yeah,
point.
and I like the mechanism Jordan uses here with you have to follow two conversations at once, which uh is doubly fun because we're in Perrin's head. We're seeing this from his perspective, so uh he has to do this too. So imagine being Perrin in the moment, and you're trying we the reader are trying to follow two conversations at once. He's kind of trying to ignore one conversation so he can have this conversation with Rand, but he can't help but hear because of his senses.
Well,
And
that
we
just reminds me so much of when I was running the gym because I would have my one-on-one clients, but I learned to use the mirrors in the gym to watch everything that was going on, because I was responsible for everybody in that room,
Mhm.
even though I had other coaches working. So I was following my client, I was following, you know, Kristen with her one-on-one client, and Nate doing a group class, and it was you learn to do it over time, but it's definitely stressful on your mind.
uh and he I like that I like the way it resolves. You get again, you're getting all four of these characters. You're getting a lot of characterization and character work in these few couple of pages. But then I like how Perrin Perrin sees um the consequences, the result of Faile and Min's conversation, and the change that happens because he can smell it. Uh, but he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand how they got to that point from where they started off because, you know, he's a guy. If he had started off uh, with another man the way Min and Fail did, there would still be that tension, and it probably wouldn't have scaled down. Uh, so 799 as the women leave, Perrin looked at Rand. Do you ever think women are strange? Why are you asking me? You're the married man. That doesn't mean you understand anything.
In fact, that just opens up a new realm of confusion.
Yeah, yeah. 20 years of marriage, and I can uh I can understand what has happened or anticipate what is going to happen, but that doesn't mean I know why.
You just learn to
Uh
protect yourself at that point.
so I kind of like this throwaway line halfway down because he's Jordan's just giving you a good sense of scale of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, even though he doesn't, he's not giving you a calendar, and he's not giving you specific distances traveled, but you get a sense of the scale of size and time. When Perrin says, Rand, I've been over 2 months on the road. My bottom's taken on the shape of a saddle. Now, yes, granted, you're in a procession. Um, you have, you know, supply wagons or horses or whatever they're carrying their supplies on. And so you're not going like you would go if you were a solo rider in a hurry, but 2 months on the road to get from the Two Rivers to Camelin. And that's so you get a sense of the scale and time. You also get an explanation of why we haven't seen him. He's just been riding for 2 freaking months. Uh, so down at the bottom of the page, so he wants him to go to Tyr, and Perrin is apoplectic of what? No, it's I've been on the road. I've got my own things to do, and you're not going to send me halfway across the continent. I don't care if you could do it with the snap of a finger. Um, Rand did not seem to be listening. He flung himself into one of the gilded chairs and stared at Perrin bleakly. You remember how Tom used to juggle all those balls and make it look easy? Well, I'm juggling now for all I'm worth, and it isn't easy. Samael and Ilian, the rest of the Forsaken the Light only knows where. Sometimes I don't even think they are the worst of it. Rebels who think I'm a false dragon, dragon sworn who think they can burn villages in my name. Have you heard of the Prophet, Perrin? No matter, he's no worse than the rest. I have allies who hate each other, and the best general I can name to face Ilian wants nothing better than to charge off and be killed. Elaine should be here in maybe a month and a half with luck, but I may just have a rebellion on my hands before then. Lied, I want to give her and her whole. I thought of going to get her myself, but that is the worst thing I could do. He rubbed his face with both hands, speaking behind them. The very worst. Uh, and of course, what does Moraine say? Because Perrin has no clue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he also doesn't know how bad of an idea it is to say, if Alanina and Varen are here, have you asked their advice? No.
Yeah.
That's um and then Perrin finds out about the split in the tower is a real thing, not just rumors. Okay. And then uh
Yeah, to Scott's comment about being under a rock, we get a lot. We kind of get an info dump in Perrin's perspective because he's been under a rock
mhm.
for.
Yeah, he's been in probably the most isolated place. It's kind of literally in the center of the continent, but it's not like, oh, it's the center of the continent, so it must be a crossroads. No, it's
Because
in the
yeah,
middle
it's
of a
it's
void.
geographically isolated
Hmm.
because of the mountain ranges and the rivers,
Hmm. Um,
and just the fact that there's no reason for anybody to go there except to pick up some Two Rivers tobacco.
yep. Uh, so it came as a shock, though, when Rand made it clear he had no intention of visiting the camp, though there were any number of men there he knew. I can't protect you or Matt, he said softly, but I can them. After that, the conversation naturally lagged until even Rand realized he had draped a blanket over it. Um, so it kind of started off, the conversation kind of started off on a bit of a high note of parents seeing that obviously he's stressed, he looks tired, but he's still Rand. He's there in his shirt sleeve, he's smiling and he's laughing, he's welcoming us and congratulating us, and genuinely happy for me and Faile. Um, but then at the end, it's the harsh realization of what all he's dealing with
Mm-hmm.
and what that means of not having anyone he feels like he can rely on. Like Perrin may not like the situation he's in, but he has Faile there right at his side whenever he needs, advice or just something to lean on. And then of course he's got Tam and Abel and the other men that he respects that he can also, look to if he needs any kind of advice or anything.
Well, and you see a contrast there that I think Jordan did on purpose. Perrin is in the initial parts of the uncomfortable part of the conversation, starting to wonder if he's going mad. But then you get it switched to another part of the conversation where parents start to realize, even without the taint, without the power, someone could go mad in this situation. With
Mhm.
that dump of information, where he describes it well as the juggling of the balls. It's like, how can you not go mad even if you were a normally sane person to begin with?
And then Perrin jumps into the fire, out of the frying pan. Um, because he bumps into his father-in-law, who is, you know, the first time I met my in-laws was to tell them that we were engaged. That was bad enough. Um, I can't imagine after you've already gotten married. Um, Lord Bashere, Perrin made a bow that was not returned. The man reeked of cold fury. I am Perrin and Davhram. We will talk, Bashere said curtly and turned on his heel. Uh, I like the I like the interaction here because you get that uh Faile is who she is because of both her culture and more directly from her family. As Perrin is thinking about and noticing how Quicksilver Bashere is, much like Faile. That was always one of the things that drove him crazy about her, is that he kind of flips on a dime of being, you know, outraged and yelling at Perrin, and then all of a sudden he's, smiling and muttering to himself and, uh pleased as can be that his daughter is a hunter for the horn. Uh and then the ending of it, the end of the conversation of uh this difference in culture once again, of this is what's so great about the world and what's so infuriating about the way it is portrayed, and not just I've ranted about this when I made you watch Blood Origin and then only watched a half hour of it, of the 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 modern way of casting muddies everything together. So
Mm.
one of the things that makes this world work is because all of the countries are distinct. They all have their own, even in the borderlands where they are much more united and much more similar because they have to be, and yet each place is still distinct. They all have a an archetypal look to the physicality of the people, and then they all have a distinct way of dress, and then they all have distinct aspects of their culture that are brought out, so that you know in your mind's eye what you're looking at when so he sets all this up, so later if he mentions a Saldean or a group of Saldeans, you can picture what you're looking at, and it is distinct from, you know, the Karhinen that they're standing next to or whatever. And so not only do you have that look, but then uh the the stark difference in other places of the female part of their culture. Um, which is actually amusing because one of the sharp contrasts that we've already seen is Era Doman. The Domini men are pretty much subservient to their women. Not as severely as other places we'll see later, but the women are definitely more in charge there. And here, uh, you have a strong woman, which has become a stupid phrase, but here it's actually real. You have strong women because they're a counterpoint. Or not a counterpoint, but a counterpart to their men who have to be strong because they stand on the borderlands and have to face Trollocs and all that. And so it really kind of makes sense that as Bashere tells him, it doesn't matter what your traditions are. Uh, in our tradition, Faile had to have permission from her mother. The mother decides, not dissimilar to the Ogier, actually. The mother decides, and Faile didn't have permission from her mother. So, as far as we're concerned, if her mother doesn't assent to this, you're not married. And Perrin doesn't like that.
Yeah, and not only does he not like that, we go back just a little bit in this conversation. The monkey dance starts.
Mm-hmm.
He smashes his wine glass, bulges up, big muscles. He uses his words, which is the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
He uses his words, but makes it very clear of that underlying threat of violence.
Well, says it and then says it explicitly when Bashere doesn't back down. Of you know if we'll see if a Saldean horseman can die as easily to a Two Rivers longbow as Trollocs do. So he, you know, not just the puff up, but then the escalation of here are my deeds, here is what I have done, and I will do the same to you if you stand in my way. And then you get a totally different kind of monkey dance. With the conversation in the next room ends with what sounds like a slap, followed by another slap that, of course, General Bashere can't hear, but wolf ears can hear. So, boy howdy, he is walking into a minefield. So then he has to do the monkey dance with his mother-in-law. And again, the distinction of culture. I like the way, it kind of turns that General Bashere was being General Bashere to Perrin. This is the way it is, and this is what's going to happen.
By
And then
by
when
the
he,
way, we had to make so many changes to the source material for TV because it lacked strong female characters.
but then when he walks into the room with Lady Dara and Faile, it he's he takes a seat. It's her, this is her show now. It's her turn. That she's the one, as he told Perrin, she has to assent to this. She has to give her permission for her daughter to marry. So now she's going to decide if this man is worthy of her daughter, if this man can handle her daughter, if this man will be uh, a good fit for her. So it's her show. So the general sits down, and now his wife becomes the general because this is her battlefield. Up until the point where Davhram says, okay, that's enough. We're done now. And this is, I have to imagine that of all the problematic scenes that require Jordan be canceled, this is the most problematic. Because of, where is it, where it finishes up. Yeah, okay, so 8:11 is the end of the scene. And I love this interaction. Enough, Dara, Bashere cut in mildly. Since you've obviously decided Zareen, Faile is no longer a child, I think Perrin will do well enough. To Perrin's surprise, Bashere's wife bowed her head meekly, as you say, my heart. Then she glared at Perrin, not meekly at all, as if to say that was the way a man should handle a woman.
Well, and we get a lot of setup for this because we have some inside Faile's head conversations where it's not that they're meek because they're going to be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. It's they want the man to be strong. And it's not meekness, it's respect. and not in the "you shall respect me," but in the "I actually do respect you."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the same way that women will brag on their man if, you know, if he's worth bragging on, and if they want to impress the, the other women, or they brag on their children in the same way of, these are the things my child has done, you know, uh, and they want that man worthy of that praise. And it is the Saldean way of doing it is almost hyperbole, but it works. You can see that as a real dynamic, as a real cultural um, system, for lack of a better word. All right. Any more thoughts on that? Because then it switches back to Min and Rand.
Yeah, no more thoughts on that.
Okay. Um. All right. Some more lovey-dovey stuff, but then they get to some vision. So 813. Um. And this is another mild nitpick. Is so he's Jordan has done this before, both with dreams and with Min's vision, to reinforce how important the group is. And then he separates the group constantly. And then if you put the girls in there, because they're part of it too,
Mm-hmm.
that you have the two groups of three, but then also together, and yet for pretty much the entirety of the series, especially going forward, Egwene is on her own.
Well, and it's in the title. He wants the chaos, right? And the separation
True,
of the group
true.
is the catalyst to chaos.
And that's one of the reasons he wants the chaos, is because you're trying to put out so many fires that you can't do anything else.
Yeah,
You know, you,
one of the sure ways to do a shoddy job at most things is to try to multitask too much.
mhm,
It's one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking they're great multitaskers when realistically we're not. There are things
mhm,
you can multitask. You can think about your grocery list while you're in the shower. That's fine. You're not going to do too bad of a job of getting water all over yourself. But trying to think about your grocery list while doing a deadlift, not so much. And I have to deal with this every day, by the way. What are you doing? I'm not going to name the names, but what are you doing? I don't know. I was thinking of something else later in my day. It's like, no, get your mind in the gym because you have 200 pounds at your feet and you can slip a disc.
mhm. Well, uh, before we get to the visions, back up half a page, because I feel like this is a setup for one of our least favorite things to come. So halfway down on 812, I could see at a glance he's besotted with her, the poor fool. This is
Mm,
Min speaking, and she with him for all the good it will do him. I don't think he would even look twice at another woman, but she doesn't believe it. Not if the other woman looks first, anyway. He's found his falcon, and I wouldn't be surprised if she kills him when the hawk appears. Poor Perrin.
yeah.
Uh, but anyway, back to the vision. Is she talks about the what she sees and knows what it means is the tiny bits of light, like fireflies trying to fill in this, you know, darkness, this seemingly bottomless pit, this darkness that wants to swallow everything. And the fireflies are greater when Rand has his group with him, when any of the others are around him. The three girls or Matt and Perrin, when they're with Rand, there are more fireflies. That they're the more he has with him, the more it seems like the light can hold its own, and then they're constantly split apart. Um, and something else I saw when you were together twice, he's going to have to be there, or you. She peered into her goblet so he could not see her face. If he's not, something bad will happen to you. Her voice sounded small and frightened, very bad. Okay. Um, and then it ends with another interesting exchange with Luz Theron, that the voice is kind of escalating all through this book. Um, we've seen before the escalation has been uh that Rand feels like Luz Theron is trying to grab hold of the power, and he has to push that back. Well, here I feel like this is an escalation because now Luz Theron is commenting on the real world and planning for the real world as if he's the one who has to deal with it, not Rand.
Mm-hmm.
When he's thinking about the Aes Sedai and nobles, if they're plotting with the nobles, blah 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 blah, and then he goes crazy.
Yeah, and this is where we get a thin veil of his sanity because of the voice in his head and the fact that it is a voice in his head with his brain. You can confuse your own thoughts with that voice as well. He could be thinking that thought, and because of the state of his mental being, he attaches the voice to these negative thoughts. His trauma thoughts are attached to this voice at some point.
Mm-hmm. And then we get the short scene where the brown sister gets stabbed. Um, in a very suspicious manner. Um, there are some clues there. Yeah. So 817, um, wondering if they were the same who had followed her. One of those faces looked familiar, that of a squat fellow with villainous eyes. And then that remembered face was thrust into hers, black eyes mocking, growling something. Uh, do Aiel have black eyes?
No.
So it should be pretty clear from the get-go she was not actually stabbed by Aiel. Um, it's also an interesting gap in her knowledge that she's a brown, and it doesn't register to her that all Aiel are fair-haired and light-eyed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and even with them around,
What
they avoid the Aes
what
Sedai.
black eyes is unusual anyways. Do gray men have black eyes?
No, I think that's just an expression for really dark eyes, a really dark, dark brown. Um, there's also an element of kind of an evil look, because that's something that's commented on earlier is wetlanders refer to Aiel as black veiled Aiel, but sometimes they refer to them as black eyed. Um, and I think that's just to denote kind of their evil and bad, because that's something that's commented on earlier when we first start to meet the Aiel. Is I don't remember who it is. Someone thinks about that phrase, black-eyed Aiel, and none of them have even remotely dark eyes. Okay, and then I believe the chapter ends with nope. Okay, so then we get some sexy time with Perrin and Faile. Um,
A good byproduct of a spike of jealousy.
uh-huh. Um, Do you remember how many grandchildren my mother said she expects? The sudden change of direction made him blink, but she had promised. That was the important thing. 6, I think. I lost count when she started telling us which were to be boys and which girls. Lady Dira had some startlingly frank advice on how that was to be achieved, which, you know, is even more explicit if you know anything about old wives' tales about this, because there are some old-fashioned ideas that if you do it in a certain way, that will make you more likely to get pregnant or make you more likely to conceive a particular gender. So let your imagination go wild, I think is what Jordan is saying there.
Let's
Oh,
get out
that's
our Kama Sutra and
yeah, that's got to be uncomfortable because you're you have as Perrin thinks when he meets her, a strikingly beautiful woman. Older, yes, but still very good looking because he kind of thinks about if this is what he has to look forward to as Faile ages. Oh, baby. Um, so you have this incredibly good looking woman giving, reading the Kama Sutra to you in a very frank manner, but it's your mother-in-law. Ah,
yeah.
that's
I
got to be
happen
some confusing hormones in your brain.
yeah, I happen to have a mother-in-law and I wouldn't want that conversation.
Mm.
And I'm usually a pretty frank and open person with these discussions, as the followers of our podcast would know.
Mhm.
It does change with mothers and mother-in-laws, and especially with the father-in-law there, because then you couldn't help but imagine it. You just be like, oh, well, she's talking about having girls. Well, Fael's a girl.
Mhm. And then we get some more Aes Sedai shenanigans of I mean it is pretty crystal clear to the reader what's going on here. As you said a second ago, holding up I can't hold up the cover of the book because mine got ripped off a million years ago. But Lord of Chaos, someone is sowing chaos here very clearly, but um the Aes Sedai are so arrogant and so preoccupied with their own world, they just can't think it through any other way. Um, you would think Varen would, but maybe that's a conversation for another time. Um, and so they're gonna go do something stupid. All right, let's pause for a second.
Yeah. Well,
Just
just the last thought on that. They do something stupid. This is the same trap that Moiraine was in. Varen keeps jumping into, even though she seemed to understand it early on.
mhm,
But all the Aes Sedai keep getting into with Rand is they're very obviously manipulating, and they it's that transparency and trust that Varen seemed to figure it out at one point, but then abandon it. That
mhm,
if I'm open and honest, this stubborn boy is more likely to do the things I want. So it was like a positive reinforcement loop sort of manipulation.
mhm,
Whereas now they're like we talked about the woman monkey dance versus the man monkey dance. They're treating him like a woman.
mhm,
They're trying to force him down a path using manipulation techniques instead of you putting a little honey in the
mhm.
vinegar, right? And every time that there's a huge explosion, that's the tactic that blows up in their face.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna go make another cup of coffee. All right, so let's get through these next two chapters. Uh, and you just segued perfectly into chapter 47 because the whole point of this chapter is Elaine trying to manipulate Matt and Matt's people. Um, both to her credit and discredit, I I feel like she absolutely knows that Matt knows, but I think to her that's part of the thrill and part of the game is, you know, you know what I'm doing, but you can't stop me from succeeding. And I think to her that's part of it. But to her discredit, and Matt kind of, you know, thinks similar thoughts as well, is he's not just Matt anymore. He's a general.
Hmm.
She's a princess soon to be queen. She should know better than to undermine a commander in front of his men. And she is absolutely undermining him. Um,
Well, keep in mind how young she is too,
yes, this is true.
because she's the same age as Egwene, who's 18. And Scott verified that in the comments of one of the other ones.
Mhm.
They're 18. And she also left home at about 16 or 17. So the training wasn't complete yet.
Mhm.
There was probably a lot more to be done.
Well, and you also see this kind of natural reaction to getting rejected, because what sparks this is her trying to get the Foxhead medallion from Matt, and you know, to the point you were making about the Aes Sedai trying to manipulate Rand, right from the get-go, it is not a conversation. And she should realize that that's just going to make Matt obstinate. You can't just tell him this is the way it is. But in her double arrogance, both as princess and Aes Sedai, is the way she phrases it is, I'm doing you a favor, because other Aes Sedai would just take it because they consider all objects of the powers rightfully belong to the power or to the tower, but I'm going to let you keep it. You're just going to give it to me every evening so I can study it.
Well, also keep in mind that so we got female of this age, and we go back to our complaints about why modern movies suck, and our like for the critical drinkers breakdown of a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the problem well is exactly what we're spelling out here. She undermined him in front of his people. She was one-upping him. She was getting that shot in. And one of the reasons modern shows suck is the woman always has to have her shot in on the guy. And
And she's always right.
these scripts are being written by young women. She's at the age where that actually seems cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's supposed to be, because I am woman, hear me roar.
And,
Plus,
and
I'm a princess.
in the modern script, Elaine is absolutely in the right, and is and the and Matt is the uncouth and or stupid man. But it's pretty clear here she's kind of being a petulant brat.
Well, and that's the difference. Modern movies suck because that one-up cool moment isn't real life. We're getting the real life manifestation of it here. So
Mm-hmm.
she thinks that way because that's what young women think like. And it's not working out well. We're seeing the downfall of it, actually.
As
Nynaeve gives us a little bit of a window into a woman who has that mentality because she had to fight from a young age,
mm-hmm.
but is learning that there is an interplay. The women's circle and the village council actually have a back and forth. It's not about one-upping each other. It's not about putting people in their place. It's about compromise, where sometimes you're right and you have to be forceful.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're right and you have to acquiesce anyways, and sometimes you're wrong. And we see the development in Nynaeve, which is why she's so compelling. And we see the younger version of it in Egwene and Elaine and all of these younger girls that are not navigating it as well, because it's experience. This is where life matters. I don't care how smart you are. The more years you live gives you insights into things.
Yeah. And Nynaeve gets, even though their reactions are a little more volcanic because of the way Nynaeve thinks about Matt, she actually gets a better reaction from him because she's direct. For all of her faults with how she thinks about Matt, that he's still you know, the cheeky little kid, playing pranks and stealing pies. He's not, and she still treats him like that, which he doesn't like, but she at least treats with him directly. She doesn't try and manipulate him. So in a way, he respects her more. Uh, because she's just going to tell him flat out what she thinks should happen, but she doesn't get, if he says no, you know, she's just going to, you know, yell back yes, uh, until one of them storms off. Whereas if he tells Elaine no, well, she's going to get snooty and she's going to be bratty and she's going to try and manipulate. She's not going to counter directly. And that just grates on him more and more and makes him want to uh more and more figure out ways to counter her, to resist her, which uh sets up a lot of stuff going on. Is that because she's so darned annoying, he can't wait to get to the title of this chapter, The Wandering Woman. Uh, and as he,
Is this
the
where they
last,
experiment by throwing poop at him and stuff with the power?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
this is part of this chapter, and it gives him a moment of, oh crap, I hadn't thought of that. That no, they can't fling a lightning bolt at me; it'll just fizzle around me. But they can pick up a rock and drop it on me, and gravity will still crush me.
Well,
So
and this is where there's a little plot hole because he was struck by lightning from the power, and that's where he died in the last book.
yeah, and I know Jordan has addressed this, and I don't remember his explanation for it. Um, that I think the way he explained it was that the lightning bolt didn't hit him directly, so he still suffered from the concussive blast as well as the shrapnel that was being thrown around,
Mm-hmm.
um, when the wall exploded. So I think that was how he addressed that, but I may have to go dig around and see if I can find that. Um,
Well, maybe while you're closing us out, I can find it.
all right, so it's, not getting into the spoiler part of it, but you can clearly see that this group that is supposed to be united on this very important mission is now about to be split apart. And the women, in their arrogance and in their desire to take charge, are pushing Matt away, when we, the reader, can clearly understand that Matt is your most valuable tool here. Because he's so uh smart, especially street smart, which you need in the place that they're going, because he's already set up Ibudar to be kind of a Wild West town. So you need that street smarts. Um, but then obviously, of course, what's also going on all through this chapter that's making him annoyed is the dice start tumbling in his head. And to him, that always means something bad is about to happen to him. From as he puts it. Uh, it uh, but the the last two sentences here, that's why they're so fun, is Mistress Anon, I feel like I've come home. The odd thing was the dice had stopped rolling in his head. So he's going to separate himself thanks to Elaine and also Nynaeve and the other Aes Sedai of how they're acting. And
Okay, so he explained it, by the way, as just like with the rocks and stuff they hurl at Matt, the lightning itself wasn't the power. It was the result of something done by the power.
So maybe a lightning bolt could hit him
Yeah.
because all you're doing is manipulating the air and water in the air to do what it would naturally do anyway. You're just making it happen rather than waiting for it to happen.
Well, except you're actually aiming it and everything too, though.
That's true.
Yeah.
So to me, that's a gray area.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that might have been one of those. He got the question and like, oh fuck.
yeah,
Well, I'm not perfect.
yeah. Any other thoughts about Matt? I think anything else is just going to kind of there's a lot more that's all of this whole chapter in a lot of ways it's partly character for Matt, but then it's also a lot of setup for this is why what's going to happen later is going to happen is also a lot of what's going on there. Um, and then it switches to the girls and I rarely have a lot to say about them. I'm sorry, but they I've pointed this out at times where uh at times they feel like a side quest in a video game.
Mhm.
So, you're just kind of hurrying through to get it done, not really paying as close attention to it as you would the main storyline. And then there are times where it's much more, compelling and part of the overall narrative. And this is just one of those times where for most of the time what the girls are doing here in Ibudar feels like a side quest.
Well, and this actually gets me to a thought I was thinking of when we started this with Perrin, but also we get a bit of it with Rand earlier in the series, and somewhat with Matt because when he was sick earlier in the series, is we get a break from all of those plot lines.
Mhm.
And it actually might add to the appreciation of him because up to this point, most people's favorite character is Perrin, but you get a huge break from him in the process. And Matt, you get a break right in the beginning where he's just basically sick for a large part of it. And Rand, you get a break all through book 3. Uh, you never get a break from the girls. They're always a subplot line in every book all the time.
I had not thought of that. Yeah, that's a good point. There are times where uh one of them isn't around as much, doesn't get as much page time, especially Egwene. Um, I think it's the next book. She's not in it very much, but then of course that's the Ibudar storyline is going a lot there,
Mm-hmm.
so it's always there. And then even afterwards,
Then you
yeah,
get the kin. Then you get
yeah, that is probably why I have always felt meh about the girl storylines in my rereads.
yeah. It's kind of just a dragging on effect. I don't think it has anything to do with what's actually happening in the story.
It's a good point.
Well, and there's a lot of almost like a duplicate. Like Tenchiko and Ibodar sometimes blend in your head because
Yeah,
the plot lines within those are so similar.
yeah. Did this happen here or did that happen there? What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
I thought this already happened. Oh no, I was thinking of something else. Uh, the main thing I like about this chapter is we just got done with a whole chapter of the girls, especially Elaine, being bratty, and here you get them being very human. Um, first when they're in the bath, giggity together, um, talking, talking openly about, especially Nynaeve, because she from the beginning, I mean, she used to be wisdom. She, as you pointed out, she had to fight for that. She had to fight to maintain her position after she got it. And then she was thrown back on the bottom rung when she went into the tower. And so now she's going to bristle at gosh darn it, wave the ring in front of people's noses. I'm an Aes Sedai. You bloody treat me like one. And they don't. And that's just going to rankle her. But of course, who is it that says it? Elaine. Did you really? Elaine asked after the way Vandine and Adelaus treated us. Uh, so, but all right, fine. That's we've got our own job to do, and that'll make it easier because you won't interfere with us. You can't fire me. I quit. And then again, when the queen comes in to talk to them, and uh, Elaine doesn't go into princess mode. She's still Elaine Aes Sedai, but not not treating her like Aes Sedai usually do. Even the Aes Sedai that are also here in the palace. And so they're able to get a lot of help out of Queen Zenobia because they treat her as an equal. They treat her as one of them. They're open with her. They're more open and direct with her than they are with Matt.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tylan mentions an advisor. Was that Tarna?
Oh, I said Zenobia. That's the Saldean queen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tylan. Yeah.
Oh, who went for the two rivers? Myril and no, Alana and Varen.
Varen. Yeah.
So was Alana her advisor?
I don't think so.
So what other Aes Sedai went to the two rivers other than Moiraine?
Wait, where is it? What page are you looking at?
847, the second paragraph. Oh no, these for the tower. Why did I read two rivers?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, I just overcomplicated something that didn't have to be. Disregard all after hello.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was when the tower split and Elida called everyone back because gosh darn it, I'm the boss and you're gonna,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna
You
know
don't
it.
come back, you'll be considered one of the rebels.
All right.
The Carradine comes back in.
Oh yeah.
Do we know who he is yet?
Yeah, we've seen him several times.
No, but I mean who he is. His other name. Do we know in text yet?
Yeah,
Okay,
because yeah,
okay,
because
so we the man who calls himself Bors.
we've seen that he's already been threatened. Uh, he's already been threatened, and we get either here or right at the beginning of Crown of Swords a scene from his perspective and thinking about how that threat to kill members of his family unless he did what he was supposed to do is being carried out. Um, but then it ends with haughtiness because that's just who they are. Um, but also, they have good reason to be optimistic, but also to want to carry that through as proof of their awesomeness. Because they do feel the need to prove themselves, especially to the other Aes Sedai. I wager in 10 days we will have the bowl. I will know what makes Matt's Terran Grill do what it should not be able to do, and we will be on our way to join Egwene, with him knuckling his forehead as fast as Master Vannon. And Vandine and Adelaus will be left sitting here with Marylil and Teslin trying to puzzle out what had happened. It is one of the flaws of Elaine's character and why she can't get along with Matt, because you shouldn't want Matt to be subservient because then he's not Matt.
Mm-hmm.
And so he won't be able to do the things that he does, the things that you need him to do. But she wants to win. As well as just, Princess Elaine being used to it. All right. So from there, it escalates pretty quick to the climax. So we'll leave it at that for now and get to go away if you're reading this series for the first time, because if we have any spoiler thoughts, we'll get into them, and we sometimes get into it with comments too, because we go, hey, wait, what the, who's it? And then Scott answers our question and we go, oh yeah, that happened then and there. And so we might be connecting dots you don't want connected yet. Uh, did, did you have any spoiler thoughts? Um,
Uh, Dang
I
it!
mean,
I
the only,
had one on our bathroom break, and I forgot to write it down when I
oh,
came back.
well, if they got the only ones I was thinking of were stuff that Matt chapter, the Wandering Woman, is setting up for later, so that we'll get to it before long. We'll be there because we're at the end of Lord of Chaos, and it's all stuff that's happening all through Matt's storyline in A Crown of Swords. Uh, um, all right, so on to the comments then. Maybe it'll come to you. Uh,
Yeah.
um, Rand made a mistake not listening to LTT about Taim. How much trouble would have been saved had he just killed him straight off? Yeah, but in his defense, Luce Theron is insane. You know,
Yeah, well, but also, I mean, since we're in spoiler section, we can spoil the end of this book. Taim saves him
that's true too.
at the end of this book. He's a slave to the Aes Sedai without Taim.
Mhm.
Perrin does his part, but without the Asha Aman, he's toast.
Yeah, that's true. That's what seals the deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Now after that, when that's the catch 22. He's shown how dangerous he is with that action, but then he also showed how useful he was with
Mhm.
that action. And Rand's in how can I use people mode, even with Perrin,
Yes.
because
Well,
his thought in that one chapter what we just went over was I need Perrin there so Samael thinks it's serious.
right. And as he says, the only person I can appoint, other than you or Matt, wants nothing more than to charge off and get himself killed. How much trouble would Rand have saved himself if he would have killed Wireman back when he was in charge of the stone, back at the beginning of Shadow Rising? But he needs him because even though he's a nincompoop and annoying, uh,
He's
he,
valuable.
he is valuable as a person that lots of other people follow.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he is kind of in a catch-22. And also, as he tells Taim at the beginning, is this is important. The Black Tower is important. It's not the Black Tower yet, but the farm is important. Finding more male channelers is important. But I got a lot of important things to do. I don't have time for this. Along with, I don't even know how to test someone to see if they can channel, let alone how to teach them. So I need someone who can do this because this is important and I can't do it. So the only other person that could do it, as far as Rand is concerned, is gentled and probably dead because that's Logain, who
Mm-hmm.
who obviously at this point we know could do it, but Rand has no clue. All right. Is
Uh,
this about the women?
yeah. Make sure the women are. Let's see, one degree or another. It's a matriarchy. There's some truth to that. At the same
Eh,
time, it's that's why I hate the term matriarchy and patriarchy because there is an interplay. And the best way to think about it is kind of to oversimplify it is women hold the keys to sex, men hold the keys to marriage.
mhm,
And one of the modern problems we have now is women are giving away the sex without the obligation of a commitment.
mhm,
And so now we're getting that Pareto distribution where these guys that can get sex anytime they want, the highly desirable guys have no incentive to settle down with anybody. And it's but back in these days, we don't have the lovely invention of birth control. In fact, one of Jordan's failings here is he does have plenty of sexy time without consequences in these books. So
Oh yeah.
realistically, there would be a much higher shot, no pun intended there, of landing a little baby with
Yeah.
all those interactions.
Well,
So
especially Rand and Min. They
yeah,
go at it like rabbits here pretty soon.
yeah, and he could have put something in there where it made it clear, like maybe she was infertile or something like that. But he never does. So going at it like rabbits is not very conducive to not having a child. I hate to break it
Yeah.
to any younger people in the audience. Pull out method is not very good.
Well, or on the other
That and
hand,
Rand wouldn't know to pull out method.
how 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 much worse would uh what's her face? Why am I brain farting on her name? The super crazy evil torturer Forsaken.
Simraj.
Cimaraj. Because Samael was stuck in my head and I just like, no, stop. Uh how much worse what she does at the end of the series, how much worse would that be if Min's 3, 4 months pregnant?
Mm-hmm.
How much worse would that be on Rand? I mean, it's already bad, but if she would have been pregnant, how much worse? Okay. But back to the what sparked all this. I don't agree with the matriarchy. That's where the way Jordan writes women is so well, because as we were talking about with Davram and Dyra Bashir, it they're counterparts. They're not counterpoints, they're counterparts. And they are both strong in their own way. And
Mm-hmm.
they respect each other for that. You
Well, and
know,
this is why modernity kind of sucks in this regard. Is a lot of the things that we kind of poo-poo as negative traits of females are protective mechanisms,
mhm,
because you are vulnerable, because you're the one that has the highest investment in the process of having a child as a human being.
yeah.
We have childs that are helpless because otherwise their heads would be too big to come out the womb. Uh, so we have them in a very helpless state, and they grow for a long time before you're out of that. Uh, it's not quite the 18 years we do in the Western society, but at least till they can walk and crawl and pick up their own food and know not to eat rocks. You know, how long do they have to drink the mother's milk before they can go on? Even if you're a formula feeder, formula is formulated a certain way, because you can't just feed your kid regular milk.
Yeah.
They need a specific amount of these nutrients. So we have a long process for the females, and the female needs to ensure that the male is going to invest in that. And we're kind of sliding the other direction right now, which is the worrisome part. I think if we're open-minded, we can adapt to it, which is where we get into the sexy time talks. But yeah, the female has to protect herself, and she does it through these manipulative methods, because she can't just grab the guy and club
Mhm.
him over the head and drag him back to the cave.
Speaking of chicks, I agree and disagree with this one, Scott. One of my least favorite devices that Jordan uses is the sending Min off on these cross-country trips, removing her from the action for months at a time. Um, he does that a couple of times, yeah. The first when he uh when he sends her off at the beginning of Dragon Reborn, is no, you Moraine telling her you're going back to the tower because I need someone I can trust carrying messages for me. And then he does it again when she leaves Salidar and we don't see her for a long time. Uh,
It's similar to this. You know, they're it's not a bad thing for him to have characters that have specific uses.
yeah,
And Doman was always our window to the world,
and
especially before
and
traveling.
and
And
and as a literary device, Min's real import is as a counterpoint and a counterpart to Rand. He needs that counterpart, that relationship part of it. He really needs that to keep him grounded. But she also has a very different way of thinking. And so he also needs that counterpoint when it comes to the ruling part of it and the planning part of it, because he has underlings. He doesn't have friends. He has sent all his friends off. So one of the reasons she's not there is because she's not needed yet.
Well, and she was
It, the part I agree on is that I like her, and so I wish we saw more of her sometimes, because she is one of the more main characters of the overall story, and yet she's not really much of a character in the first half of the series because
well,
we see her so sporadically.
she is well, I think that's one of the things that helps, just like my comment earlier about breaks from characters, is you don't get over inundated with her. And but also I think a lot of people like her for the same reasons they like Matt. She's the open-minded one. She's the I can see the patterns in the world kind of person. Uh and Rand needs that because in his Rand's like Matt in some ways, and he's like Perrin in some ways. Where he's like Perrin is he wants to fit the square in the circled hole because that's the way it's supposed to be, because that's what my plan said. Where in Matt's mentality, it's the I have a circled hole, I need to find a circle, and Min's the same way, and that's where she gets into she's the philosopher, which I think is actually was really good on Jordan's part. Is he threw a curveball there because she's the barmaid when you first meet her, and she turns out to be the intellectual by the end.
Well, he threw a curveball into a trope, because if you think about it in that regard, she's the stripper who's just stripping to pay her way through med school. That doesn't really exist in real life, but sure.
Yes, it does. We could tell the audience that I went to a bachelor party and ended up tutoring a stripper in her trigonometry because she was actually in school and had her books there. And
or poor other bachelors. But I lost my train of thought. All right. If I had been in Matt's position, I'd have gone back to the band and left Egwene to the Sharks. The band could just follow along until Elaine is ready to leave. Egwene needs to tell the Aes Sedai the truth about Matt and the band. Using them to keep the Aes Sedai fearful and uneasy is another example of her thinking she's superior to everyone else.
Well, and this is why I reneged on the agreeableness part, because he is agreeable. That's what makes Matt Matt. He's just gonna try to make it right in his own way. I
totally disagree with this for that reason. Both parts of this, because no, if you were Matt, you would have done what he did because he had to do that because he's Matt. Is he promised Rand that he would stick to Elaine and keep her safe and safely deliver her to Caemlyn. So one, he can't go back because of that promise that he's going to keep an eye on Elaine and fulfill his promise. And two, he can't go back because by golly, he's not going to let them drive him off. As you know,
well, not only that, he sees the danger around Egwene that Egwene can't see around herself.
Yes.
And because he can see it, and he knows he can't just tell her that it's there because he knows her. He knows his next best move is to just facilitate the danger despite her.
Yeah, so the first thing we saw him do today was throw out the banner. Because that's who he is you're not going to drive. Not only are you not going to drive me off, I'm going to fly my flag. I'm going to unzip my fly and flop it out on the table. As for the second part, Egwene also can't do that because the kind of the flawed assumption there is that she would tell them the truth about Matt and the band, and then they would make the right decision, but they wouldn't. Because they're not going to react to that information like Egwene would want them to. So she has to use that. She has to be deceptive because
she's dealing with women.
Because of how the other Aes Sedai treat her. So in order to do what needs to be done, and Egwene is right in this regard. Now, one of the things we've complained about her previously is that she rationalizes and doesn't accept when she has been wrong. Instead, she rationalizes it. Now you can rationalize and go, well, this is why I did that, but I shouldn't have done that. She never has that thought, which
Well,
is
this
one of
this
her
is one of those
flaws.
moments where a broken clock is right twice a day. You know,
Yeah,
she's right here, even though it's the same behavior that we kind of poop on her a little bit for.
the the Salidar Aes Sedai need to get moving. They won't do it on their own. Telling them the truth won't make them accept Matt or accept the band or accept the Dragon Sworn or accept that these aren't there's a difference between those following Rand and those calling themselves Dragon Sworn. They won't make the right decision because they're too darned arrogant. So in this instance, yes, Egwene is being duplicitous, but she's right. She's doing the right thing to make the right thing happen.
Yeah, I think we've all lived in the world long enough to know that telling the truth all the time is really hard, because there are a lot of instances where the truth has negative consequences. And we can Jordan Peterson it and say the best possible thing is the thing that happened if you tell the truth. But in the story, in the fight of good and evil, in this point, there was a gray area there.
I do though. I like this comment, and I have a hard time disagreeing with this. Is what rock has Egwene been hiding under that she doesn't know Matt was the hero of the Battle of Karheen? Now, before we started recording, we had ideas of, okay, it's plausible that she didn't know because during the battle she was knocked out and she had to recover from that lightning strike of Samael.
And then shortly after, she was
Shortly
basically
thereafter,
power raped by Lanfear.
yep. And
And
so she was trying to recover from that, but still, it's a hard sell that she didn't know and she didn't hear about it. So either that is kind of something Jordan forgot, or it's just a major flaw in her character that she knows but she can't believe it.
well, look at her dealings with Rand. She does a lot of this na 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 kind of thing. And
So I can see how she would have heard the stories, but wouldn't let herself believe it. Like Rand was disbelieving that when he finds out that Matt killed Couladin, but he accepts it. I mean, he assimilates that information. Um,
well,
whereas
Rand's got a different perspective too, because it was just book 2 that he took out a sword master. And with the basically I'm gonna die anyways move, but he did it. And so in his head he could be like, well, shit, maybe the same thing kind of happened with Matt. You get a little bit of grounding there, where Egwene, was she present when he fought Gawain and Galad, or was she already out of the tower?
no, they would have been in the tower
Yeah.
because that was they all went back together, and then they didn't leave the tower until Matt left. They left shortly after Matt left.
Okay. So she might have even
That's
had
a
she was under 2 rocks then, because she should have known that story, because that would have gone through the tower like
you
wildfire
gotta know
fire.
that would have gone through the
Yeah.
tower like wildfire with how big a deal Jordan makes of how many um novices and accepted and even full Aes Sedai were there watching, fawning over Galad.
Mm-hmm.
And with their interactions, they had a lot of interactions because of Elaine and because both of the boys had a crush on Egwene. So you would have to think that they would have heard that story as well. So I rather than kind of a slip on Jordan's part, I think that says more about Egwene, that much like she's still treating Rand like Rand when he is Rand and the Dragon Reborn,
Well,
she's still treating Matt like Matt.
we can kind of I think we keep saying Matt gonna Matt. We can also say Egwene gonna Egwene,
Mhm.
because I mean, that fits a lot of things we've talked about, because she does ignore things that are inconvenient to her mental state,
Yeah,
and does self-justify a lot of things that would otherwise be inconvenient to her mental state.
very true. All right. Well, speaking of inconvenient, that's all I got to say. So now I have to go try and work the knot out of my back so I can work out. And we'll see y'all next time with wrapping up what happens here at the end
Yep,
of this book.
we will finish. We promise we will finish Lord of Chaos this time. And I got to skim through Crown of Swords because I'm just, other than the end, I'm just not as familiar in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We'll see y'all then.